Hey, fellow patriots, I'm Bree.
And I'm Blaze. Some call me Pa. It has been said that we have 4 boxes to keep ourselves free. These are the soap box, the ballot box, the jury box, and the ammo box.
And we are the 4th box. We are here to arm you with enough information, resources, and skills to take back your freedom, increase your self-sufficiency, and inspire you to join in the fight against tyranny.
Thomas Jefferson said, "Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty." Thank you for joining us and for joining in this fight.
Welcome back to the 4th box. Alrighty, everybody. Welcome back to episode 70 at the 4th box. I can't believe we have been doing this for 70 weeks, Pops. How about you?
I know, it's gone by really quick. Oftentimes when we are on Sunday, I think, oh my, we got to get ready for the podcast already.
Yeah.
And the folks that are doing it every day, I give them a lot of credit. You got to be pouring through material nonstop.
Yeah. I also don't think people realize like how much time goes into, putting together the episode, like what we're going to talk about and brainstorming those things and talking to guests and trying to get that lined up and getting it edited. So yeah, the people who do it, even a few times a week, it's a lot of work, a lot of time for sure.
Yeah, it is. But as we always do, we want to welcome all of our guests who may be joining us from around the country and elsewhere. It's always most enjoyable to know that we are sharing time with fellow patriots and those who are deeply committed to finding a way to get this country back on track and restore the republic.
Yeah, for sure. What's your toast for tonight on that note?
Well, I have just a tiny glass here of Tullamore Dew Irish whiskey, and I'm toasting Tina Peterson's apparent release. It looks as though that may be forthcoming as Trump has ordered the Department of Justice to do all they can do to secure her release. We know that she has been incarcerated, and I would suggest wrongly, for questioning the 2020 election by the Attorney General out there in the state of Colorado. So we are standing with Tina Peterson and raising our glass, certainly hoping that she will be released soon. It was a really significant sentence, 9 years for, simply. Of course, there's a lot of trumped up stuff that went into it, as there normally is during these things. But anybody who stands opposed to the agenda is and should be expecting to be threatened by the very agenda that they're standing against. So, Tina, hope she's out soon.
Yeah,
Cheers.
No doubt. Cheers. Another example, another of many examples of lawfare that we've been seeing in the past several years.
Yeah, amen to that. Amen. My quote tonight: if everyone is thinking alike, then no one is thinking. And that came from one of the true stalwarts of the founding days, Ben Franklin, one of the key figures, certainly one of the elder spokesmen, and greatly relied upon through those times in the construction of the Declaration of Independence, Constitution, all of those things. He was an integral piece, and we often find some great words of wisdom from Ben. So that one comes from Ben tonight. If everyone is thinking alike, then no one is thinking. I thought that was great.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, so it's fitting, I think, for the conversation tonight. We're going to try and talk about some news headlines that, you aren't seeing in the mainstream. And I think we've talked about it a few times here, through the past several weeks and even months. Like, it seems that there should be no one listening to these mainstream media sources anymore. It seems that number should have gone down significantly, and I do believe that it has, but I think there are still so many people that fully get all of their information, whether it's about politics in this country or other news in general, they're getting all of their information from these very specific sources. And that feels like a little bit of an outdated thing to do, to be honest. Like, we just have so many other sources available to us, and being able to access information is at a level that it never has been before. There's just so much at our fingertips, and at times that's bad, but I think that it serves a lot of good when people are trying to uncover the truth, because you have a lot more access to the truth and to spreading the truth. Um, so it's always interesting to me that it still feels like such a huge part of the country is getting all of their information and then basing their entire belief system and worldview off of these mainstream legacy media networks that we know to be corrupted. We know to be literally bought off and funded by the radical left. So when you know that, how do you still go along with the messaging? So that was a little bit long-winded, but that's kind of the point of tonight's episode, is just diving into some headlines that probably aren't headlines to, the everyday onlooker of the news. And I think a lot of our guests see similar things to what we see, but I also think there are people who come on here to listen to things that we might have found that they didn't, not just our opinion on those things. So hopefully tonight we can dive into some topics that have been going on that maybe you haven't heard about yet. I think I've got a few. I don't know if there's anything too crazy, but hopefully, Pops, you have some in mind to get us started.
I do, but I'm going to back up for a moment to your lead in there, and as you watch the world changing and evolving around us, you kind of wonder what it is that keeps folks committed to staying tunnel vision and staying in those comfortable spots that they've grown used to with the legacy media or whatever you want to call them. I call it a propaganda arm. But it's like people are a little bit afraid of grasping reality or something other than what they have been indoctrinated with for their whole life. So I think it's a comfortable spot to stay in that arena that you've kind of grown up with, rather than looking outside and having being forced then to realize that much of your belief system is based on falsehoods. So I struggle with trying to figure out why people wouldn't want to know the truth and act accordingly or build their life based on the truths that they recognize. They'd rather stay in this uh, you know some phase that has nothing to do with reality. And one of the things, as I was thinking about topics for tonight, that really comes to mind. Of course, we've talked many times about the COVID, and people are still in denial that this was something that was foisted on us by a select few. But aside from that, another one that kind of popped into my head, and of course we have friends out there that are dealing with the carbon capture pipeline. Now,
Mm-hmm.
how can we as an educated society accept that carbon dioxide necessary for all plant life, humans are deeply invested in the plant life around us, but somehow we're going to allow these ghouls, these criminals, to tell us, and we're going to accept that carbon dioxide needs to be sequestered and put underground. It is ridiculous to me that we as a society at large can accept something that we as children learned was false, and we're going to take something that is necessary for all life on the planet, is reliant upon the green and the vegetation around us, and we're going to allow some people who are very interested in a further transfer of wealth to tell us that we need to be capturing this stuff. It's beyond reason. But one of the things I thought of when we were talking about topics and people being committed to those old sources that they got their information from. So enough
Yeah.
on that.
Well,
I
before
did
you
want to.
go, I do
Okay.
want to jump in there because I think that's a great point to get us started. We've had, what, 4, maybe 5 conversations with those guys. And I
Yes.
do think their story is starting to gain a little bit of traction to a broader audience. But
Hmm.
let's be realistic. Like, that's a huge story, and it is not anywhere in any news network at all whatsoever. I mean,
Let's
nobody's
let's
talking about this, including alternative news sites. So we had the, fortunate occurrence of meeting them in Las Vegas because of your connection to other like minded people. Had we not gone to that, we never would have heard that story, which makes me always question every time we talk about their story, how many other stories are like this? How many other things like this are going on around the country that we don't see just because it's not in our immediate area and because we don't have direct contact with those people? Like, this is such a great one to start off on, even if it is by accident, of a massive news story that's not being covered. And we don't have to go into it anymore just because there's 4 episodes. If you want to hear about it, go back and listen to them, obviously. But
hmm
it's a perfect example of this. Like,
hmm
it's not just not in the mainstream, it's also not in the alternative news sources. So where do people find these things? They don't. And it just further illuminates the fact that you see what people want you to see.
Sure. And I wanted to throw a plug in because I have heard our friends Sam Bushman out at the Liberty Roundtable and Sheriff Mack talking about it on occasion as well. And of course, they were both out at that event also. And your point's well taken. That hadn't we been in that small circle of a few hundred people that were out there discussing the problems of today, um, would we have heard of it yet? And I suspect that we may have, but we certainly wouldn't have had the detail that we do or had a broad understanding of what's really going on out there. So anybody who is talking about this instance in particular, or the release of Tina Peters, hopefully upcoming, or the Amish people that are around the country in various locations that have been harassed by the iron fist of the Marxist government because they are operating outside the rules that somebody else put in place. There's lots of people, to your point, there's lots of people that are being threatened because they simply don't want to go along with the agenda. And I think people that shut off alternative news sources or alternative sources for opinion and information are not hearing these stories. Like down in the Carolinas and Eastern Tennessee, how many of the people in the country have long forgotten that this event has gone on and that there's still people live. They went through a winter. They went through a winter down there in the hills of Carolina, Tennessee without proper shelter, and there's nobody really in this country making much of a fuss about it anymore. So it's a 24-hour news loop. It's constantly pumping new propaganda into the followers. And it's up to us to help spread the word on these other problems and to get people to stand up and recognize government is not looking out for your best interest.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's exactly where my mind was going to, was that example. Like, that was on and off the radar so fast, but the people that are in that area they're never recovering it from it in their lifetime. Their
Sure.
lifetime. And it's off all of our radar. And these are the kinds of things that just, like, it makes me so frustrated because people get so riled up over things just because some, major news network blasts a headline, and it doesn't matter how true it is. It doesn't matter how biased it is. It doesn't matter if it's, big pharma or the military industrial complex behind it. It doesn't matter. They just see it and get all excited. And it's like, you have people like that suffered from Hurricane Helene that you're not worried about. So don't pretend that human rights is like what you're all about. Like, you make your whole personality, human rights. I'm fighting for
Mm-hmm.
human rights because I'm out here because I saw CNN say something about, BLM, and that's what I care about. That's everything that I do. It's like, but you don't. Like, it's just so, and that's what makes me so frustrated about all of this. But going back to earlier in this conversation, it was like, we don't understand why people don't wake up to it. And I don't think that's a question we're ever going to answer. There's so many reasons, like, ignorance is bliss, or maybe it's an ego thing. You don't want to admit that you were wrong or whatever. I don't know why. I'm never going to understand why there are people that won't. However, I do think that sharing the stories that aren't being heard is so critically important, because those stories are the ones that have the ability to wake somebody up. And it just has to be one story that makes them kind of like, what? They just have to second guess one thing and be interested enough in one thing to look into it deeper. So hopefully some of the things we touch on tonight will do that for someone. Like we've discussed it many times, it has to be something that hits close to home for someone for it to be enough to shake them out of their stupor. They've been living surrounded by lies for so long that there has to be something that directly correlates to their own life and connects to their personal interests. So
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. I as you were talking about that, I couldn't help but remember back several weeks ago now when we had Bucky Lecker on as a guest, and he talked about how he was awoken from his slumber or stupor or blind commitment to the agenda. It just was happenstance that he listened to a program that came from a different side of the aisle, that shone a whole new light on an event such as one of these police shootings. And the
Yep.
story was backed up with the facts. And as he looked at the facts, he had the wherewithal to accept that he had been lied to. And he started looking into a lot of his belief system and recognized that it was all built on lies. So, one of the other quotes I like related to that very topic comes from the cynic Mark Twain. Had a great eye and wit for things, but he said it's easier to fool the people than convince them they were fooled. So, I guess uh, people don't want to admit that they've been fooled, so they'll stick to the story even if the evidence is overwhelming. But anyway, a couple of those uh, mentions of previous podcasts that I think are relevant to this, because we've kind of danced around this subject over the last 69 episodes about people not waking up. And like you said, I think there's a lot of factors, choice and pride and otherwise. But we're here to continue to try and share information that folks may not be hearing. And as part of that, I wanted to open up the conversation tonight with a couple of things. One is that I'm sure the agenda is never going to promote this story, but there's significant evidence of the South Pole ice cap growing significantly because of snowfalls, I think, in the eastern glacier basins that have significantly grown over the last year. But because climate change is such a big wealth transfer opportunity for the global elites and those that choose to rule us, you are never going to hear these stories. But if it was melting, you would hear it because it fits the narrative. But if it's growing, you're never going to hear it. So I thought that was kind of one that might be resonating with folks that are committed to preserving the environment and making it better. And I think many of us are, hopefully on both sides of the aisle, recognizing that this is the place we have to live and raise our families, and we should be trying to protect it. And if now is evidence that the ice caps are growing, then isn't it then time to consider all of the BS that we get crammed down our throat related to global warming?
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a great one to start off on, because that's one that it is such a cornerstone of the beliefs that a lot of people latch on to. Like people who are, most concerned with that will flock entirely to one party, the left, most often, because of their beliefs with that issue. And it's a great one because you're absolutely right that if the left truly is so concerned with these things, then why don't they share a story like that? They tell us, we believe in science and we believe in climate change and we want a better earth. And it's like, if you believe in science and the science tells you that this ice cap is growing, how is that not good for the climate? And how are you not sharing that with people? And then why are you using this whole climate narrative to just solicit more money out of people? That's the thing that gets me and is always like the wake up call. That's the big red alarm bell. Like if the opposite side to me is trying to just simply get more money, get more power by sharing their belief, it's like
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to question what you're up to. Even if it's somebody I agree with. If their narrative, whatever it might be, aligns with me, but the end result is that they get more money, they get more power, they take away some of our freedoms, I'm going to question that. I'm going to look into that further. And in this case, it's the opposite because it's saying to their followers, hey, maybe we were not all that correct in what we told you
Mm-hmm.
about the climate thing. And that's why those stories don't get shared. So that's a great one.
Yeah, and just to add some, anecdotal evidence to that, when you hear that the super wealthy and those that are telling us we got to ride our pedal bikes because the planet's overheating and the ice caps are melting, they're the same people that are jetting around the country and the world to social events and otherwise, and they're the ones that are buying oceanfront property and putting mansions on while they tell us to ride our bicycle because the oceans are rising. We have got to have the wherewithal to recognize the bullshit that's being crammed down by our throat by those that choose to rule us, and recognize that only we can take back the freedom that they're stealing when they, as you suggested, impart taxes on us, carbon taxes, etc., to slow down the Earth's heating while they're jetting around in private jets blowing tons and tons of carbon into the air. They tell us to ride our pedal bikes. That's a ludicrousness, and that's really why we are encouraging folks to look for alternative sources of information.
Yeah, I mean, it's like what you said a few weeks ago. We barely touched on it. I wish we would have touched on it more because similarly, nobody really talked about the acres and acres in the Amazon rainforest that got cut down for no less than a climate summit.
Yep.
I
Yep.
that one goes beyond belief even for me, and there's like nothing that I don't believe these people are capable of, but that is just so mind-blowing, and that's like the perfect example that they want us to see what they're up to. I know that there's like a name for this theory of like they have to tell us what they're doing for like whatever karmic system they believe in.
Mm-hmm.
They have to show us what the bad that they're up to, and then we'll just willingly comply with it anyway. So they kind of have kept themselves out of trouble. And that's what they did here. Like they just told us how much they absolutely do not care about the climate by holding a climate summit in the middle of the rainforest and building a super highway through it. Meanwhile, to your point, yeah, they tell us that we need to drive electric vehicles and we can't use plastic bags anymore. Like
Mm-hmm.
what is the logic there, and why are these stories not being talked about on a greater scale? Because anyone from both sides of the aisle should question that. Even if it's like your team, you should still be like, why are you guys doing that?
Mm-hmm. I think sometimes the well, we like to call it the left, but I really just like to call it the puppets in elected office, that being the left and the right, that are complying with the wishes of those behind the scene at the deep state level and beyond that at the global elites. I think sometimes they see how ludicrous of an idea they can get the public to follow, and then they know really what kind of ground they're gaining, and they know that they can come out and push vaccines, and there's people still running off to get them while there's evidence being brought to the table about the super high rates of autism and all these other problems. We could go down so many different paths here. But another point I wanted to talk about was found on Lou Rockwell today, or yesterday anyway, the last couple of days, why we need nullification. And the article is really written about foreign aid. and how much money this country spends on foreign aid, and is it really constitutional? And the simple answer is no. Nowhere in the authorities that have been granted, mind you, granted by the states to the federal level, to the general government. Nowhere does it say that we're obligated or should be sending American taxpayers money all over the world, but we do it all the time. Of course, we know that there's kickbacks, and that's why these people that go into office on 150 or 170 or $190,000 a year salary, within a couple of terms, they're multimillionaires because this money flows out of the country. A big piece of it flows back to them because they appropriated it. But there is no constitutional authority, and the article goes on to talk about nullification, and there's nullification on a lot of different levels in the courts. We can nullify poor law by being back to the jury box, one of our four boxes that we've mentioned from time to time. This is a another topic issue that you are not going to hear in the mainstream media. Again, these people are all in cahoots. The people that are in elected office are getting the kickbacks. They are also participating with big media and all of those things. But I think it's a story worth noting, and it brings up a point that's near and dear to our heart, which is the third box, through nullification of bad law, and by keeping the American public ignorant of their rights and their duties, these things never happen. Jury nullification, you never ever hear it happening, but it should be happening all the time because there's bad law being written all the time, and it's up to us to repeal it and nullify it.
Yeah, exactly. I'll jump into one while we're kind of jumping around these different subjects here, and this is one that was on Tucker Carlson, so pretty sure he's got a few more viewers than we do, but
Yep.
it's still not being talked about by anyone major. And if it is, like any of these discussions, if you look it up, it's just going to be like, that's not true, and here's why. Crazy conspiracy lady says this, and like they just shut it down so fast. And like we've seen with so many people that we've had on the show, even, they discredit the person to the point where when you look into these stories, you don't have any reason to believe the things they're telling you because they've made it seem like this person is so off their rocker and has been, stripped of any certificate or diploma or, doctorate or whatever title they have behind their name. They are stripped of it because of the lawfare and what have you that we've discussed previously. But so you may have seen this. Catherine Austin Fitts, former HUD Assistant Secretary under President George H.W. Bush, claims trillions of dollars were funneled into secret underground network. So going to talk about this one for a second because, yes, even though it was on Tucker, I still think a lot of people don't hear these stories. And basically what she was saying was that $21 trillion in unsupported adjustments at the Department of Defense and HUD between 1998 and 2015 are believed to have gone to an underground network, which has been discussed for decades. Like, how long has the quote-unquote conspiracy theory of the, massive underground network at the Denver airport been a thing? That's been discussed for, as long as I can remember. And then there have been a lot of different occurrences throughout the years where sometimes it's really talked about and then it kind of fades away and then it pops up again, where in certain parts of the country, usually very remote, like New Mexico or in Idaho, people hear loud explosions and they describe them as sounding like they're coming from underground. And this has happened. It happens in, like I said, kind of a lot. There's a lot of reports of it for a while all at once, and then it fades away, and then it'll come again in another place. I think people who are more in tune with like alternative media have maybe heard some of these stories before, but if you haven't, I would suggest looking into it a little bit because it's really interesting to hear firsthand accounts of people who live in these areas. And not saying that's necessarily 100% tied. However, there have been so many different speculations throughout the years that there is some kind of underground network, be that military, defense, some sort of safe haven for elites. We don't know. But this woman, Catherine Austin Fitts, very openly said, like, everything that she can find would show that that is what is going on here. She said there was $6.5 trillion in unsupported army spending in fiscal year 2015. $6.5 trillion. Like, and this is obviously overlapping with the 21 trillion with the Department of Defense from 1998 to 2015. They had a $122 billion budget when there was 6.5 trillion in unsupported spending. Like, that is 54 times the spending amount authorized by Congress, and there's nothing anywhere in the system that we can see that would like allow for that amount of money to be spent. That's such an egregious amount of money. So I'll share the article on that one too, but obviously this is another thing where I just would say, like, you have to look into these things and you have to do it yourself and you have to be open-minded about it, because this is one of those stories where people cry conspiracy right away, and then as soon as they look it up, they see, like I said, this woman basically being discredited on all your major news sites, and the story just gets swept under the rug like so many other stories do. But we have to talk about these things. We have to question them, because if we're going to talk about Doge and we're going to talk about, you know, waste, fraud, and abuse, we're going to talk about uncapped, unchecked spending that we don't even know where it's going. Like, these things matter. And the other thing that matters is why. If that's happening, why? Why are they doing something so insane sounding? Like, if you if you just look at it at face value, it sounds insane, right? Well, then why? And if they're not doing that, then where did that money go? Also, why? Like, these alternative stories, we have to gravitate to, I think, even if it's only to just question how they came into being in the first place. Because maybe there's a nugget of truth in it. But if that nugget exists, then it is our responsibility to dive into it further and make sure that it doesn't get pushed under the rug like everything else, like Epstein, like so many stories that just, they come out and they fade away. Like, they matter and they are very important to this country if we want to talk about our spending, if we want to talk about our defense systems or lack thereof. Like, we can't talk about these things and then ignore stories like that. So, super interesting one that I would definitely suggest people look into further on their own and make your own decisions about it.
Yeah, that's great. I again, as you were going down through that, and I had read the story, as you were going down through that, you made so many points that are worth following up on. Probably could spend the rest of the episode on it, but a couple of the highlights that I think are worth mentioning: $21 trillion it's suggested were spent on underground cities and connected underground cities. And the lady goes on to say, I remember, I'm going from memory now, there's over 100, like maybe 150 or 170 of these underground cities or communities that were funded. So my next point is, first of all, $21 trillion, isn't it significant that the national debt at this point is like 36 trillion? That's like almost 2/3 of the total debt would have been spent. And as you suggested while you were speaking about this topic, that there's much speculation it's for a hiding place for the elites should there be social unrest, nuclear war, or some other kind of calamity. And I suspect that that's completely true. The last point on this topic that I think is worth mentioning, this is how you know, and I stress this often when we have a chance to talk with people, that the Republicans are no different than the Democrats. First of all, if there is a shred of truth or suspicion in the American public about these things, then there should be a discussion by those who are in a position to appropriate such funds. If they don't know anything about it, they should be demanding a full investigation from Congress on these matters. But you hear crickets, you hear bullshit stuff about changing football teams' names and this sort of nonsense to keep us distracted. Talk about our show last week while this sort of thing's going on. So our children, our grandchildren, their children are going to be saddled with the debt so that the cowards of today can spend money without being questioned. And both parties have allowed this to go on. The Doge hasn't come out with anything related to these. And there's a significant story by a person who had a significant role in a department that would have had some knowledge about this going on. So it cannot be completely blown off or discredited. And that is to me why you know that the people in Washington, D.C., they're all criminals. They are all in this crap together. And it is only up to us to dig for the information and decide what to do with it.
Yeah, exactly. What you said is so important. Like, it doesn't matter if you are Republican or Democrat or you're some independent politician. If a story like this gains any traction whatsoever and you stay silent, you're guilty by default. Yeah. Like, it is your job to question this. And if you don't, to your point, you must be involved. You must know what's going on already, and it must be you and your family that's going to sit cozy down there when shit hits the fan.
Exactly. I'm ready to shift gears again to go back to maybe like an environmental story. And I don't know how many folks have heard it, but there was a significant death and erratic behavior by sea mammals out off the California coast, where they're actually sea lions and things attacking people. And they believe that this is coming from a pollution-related algae or something that grows in the water as a result of there being various pollutants dumped in there. And when these things ingest or somehow take this matter into their system, apparently it drives them nuts, and or it can kill them, because there are stories breaking about swimmers being attacked, which is a very unusual occurrence, I would say, by a sea animal, other than maybe like a shark type predator or something like that. So, just again, there's so many stories out there that are available for those that are interested enough to look at the world and what's going on around us. But I found that to be a really interesting story. I don't know if you had heard or seen anything about that one.
No, I hadn't. And, immediately my conspiracy mind goes to the chemtrail thing that we talked about just last week. Like, I had seen some videos of people, I don't know exactly what the substance was that it wasn't like a metal detector, but it was kind of along those lines that they were using out on the beaches. And I'll have to look it up because I don't know off the top of my head. But I had seen these videos of people sort of like collecting this material, like from the sand and just like the ground. And it was kind of like there was no reason for it to be there, like so plentiful. Mm-hmm. It was a chemical based product, obviously, based substance. And immediately my head is like, oh, well, yeah. I mean, we talk about all the different pollutants. We talk about all the different ways that they're trying to kill us. And one of the big ones is that they literally are spraying toxins into the air 24/7. Mm-hmm. 24/7. Like, that used to be a conspiracy. It's not anymore. We know that because most of the country, or most of the states in this country, now either have legislation being signed to ban it in their state, or it's in the process. Like, it's coming down the pike. They've started that. Most of the states. I do not think it's going to pass in most of the states, and California is probably one of them. And I'm not saying that's the only thing causing this. I'm just saying, if there are pollutants in the water, whether it's from the sky or otherwise, and it can make these animals aggressive, what do we think it's doing to all of us? What do we think it's making us want to do to each other? Mm-hmm. It's a little bit curious.
I think that's a great point. That's a great point. And this is just a small sampling of an area that's apparently being affected by man-made pollutants and some natural, I think, if you get a chance to look at the story, occurrences in the water. But there's an elevated rate now that is causing these animals to do these things. So just a story I found to be interesting. It's probably unlikely you'll find it on your favorite mainstream media outlet. But there's just a plethora of them, and they're out there every day. And like you suggested early on, it's up to us to go out digging for it. Shifting gears again, if you're ready to move on, I found this one especially hilarious. 1,600 academics rejected in the UK. I don't know if you knew, but in the UK, they came out with a ruling in the judicial branch that females are defined by their biology of all things. We had to go to court to determine this. But
Oh
anyway,
yeah.
there's been 1,600 academics. Now, these are the people that we turn to help impart wisdom on us. 1,600 of them have signed a document that states women should not be defined by biology and that trans women are women. So if we have the intellectual cream of the crop in society that are willing to promote a lie and the further destruction of the family unit and of the whole community based on family units, because this is again what the agenda wants to be selling. I found that especially humorous. Whether or not that appears on any of the mainstream media outlets, I kind of doubt it. But why and how did we get to the point that people who are generally considered to be the brightest amongst us are now declaring that a woman is not a woman? It's just absolutely mind numbing that this kind of thing is going on.
Yeah, and I think it's important to talk about situations like that that are in other countries, because we've kind of referenced this before. We've spoke about the West. Like, a lot of people, reference the West when we talk about trying to restore not just what this country is meant to be, but like what freedom is on a global scale. And there are so many situations like this going on in European countries that are part of, the West, which is kind of like, we think about civilized nations, the nations that are trying to progress society and already have a sense of freedom. All these nations that have any freedom at all, it's all of us that freedom is trying to be stripped from. It's not just here in America, it's happening on a global scale, which, it ties back to what we keep saying. These underground networks, these underground societies, these global elites, like, this is real. All of this stuff, all this transgender stuff, all this illegal immigrants flooding into these places and changing the dynamic, it's happening on all of these countries. It's not just here.
Mm-hmm.
And there has to be a reason for that. It's not just a coincidence that all of these global leaders decided we're going to destroy our country from the inside out at the same time. Like, clearly somebody else is pulling the strings behind that. But yeah, the transgender one, I mean, no, I didn't see that particular article. You probably saw, though, that the ban on transgenders in the military, like, they're allowing that to go through our Supreme Court. So that's good, at least. Because at the end of the day, you can have 1,600 people tell you that this man who is dressed up as a woman is a woman. It doesn't make that so. But what's important is the reason that these people aren't allowed in the military isn't just because of some, like, inherent bias people have against them. It's because they have a mental disorder. And it's because your functionality as a human being, whether you are a biological male or woman, has decreased substantially because you're taking chemicals to absolutely disrupt your hormones and all of the systems in your body. So you are no longer functioning at the level that you are supposed to function. You're not functioning at a human level anymore. And that's by choice and design. So good for those 1,600 people who decided that and feel that way. But the reason that something like this actually is happening in our military and they're saying you're not allowed to be here is because it doesn't matter what you call yourself. You are no longer functioning at a capacity that is good enough to be in the military because you are poisoning yourself.
Yeah, the other point I'd like to mention about that, of course, Pete Hegseth has come out very strongly opposed, and I am standing with him 100%. But the other point that's a little bit less clear or a little bit less obvious is I don't think the Supreme Court wants a battle over this one. I think we are working toward a showdown between branches of government, that being the executive branch, i.e., the president, the judicial branch, that being the federal courts and the Supreme Court, and the legislative branch, that being the Senate and the House. And we know that the Senate and the House are the biggest candy asses of the bunch. They do nothing when it comes to upholding what their job was, which they have the most amount of control because government in this country is by, of, and for the people. And the House of Representatives, of course, is the people's house. And they do the worst job in holding up their end of checks and balances. I don't think the Supreme Court wants to challenge the executive branch. The executive branch has jurisdiction over the military. He hands down to his department Secretary of Defense, the head of the military, Pete Hegseth, that this stuff's not going to go on, and he carries it out. And I don't think that the Supreme Court wanted the battle to be over this issue because I don't think it's one they can win on. The president clearly has the authority as designated in the Constitution to the military. So I think they may have wanted to go against it, but I don't think this was the hill they wanted to take that battle up on. But I think there is one brewing. And as I mentioned there moments ago, I think the House and the Senate, the House especially, is the weakest group of them all. They are the least courageous, the most bought off, and they all are bought off, by the way. But they are the biggest bunch of jellyfish that you can find, and they go along with who's ever seeding their pockets to get reelected, and they do nothing to stand up for the rights that they are supposed to be protecting. Anyway, got a little bit long-winded on that one, but I did see that story. I have another one, and this one I was really, Sheriff Lamb slams AOC, who was basically saying that, by deporting these people, illegal immigrants out of this country, that this is sanctioned kidnapping by the government, and Sheriff Lamb comes out and says that she's unfit for Washington. And I like Sheriff Lamb. Everything that I've been able to find on him, I like Sheriff Lamb. But my point back would be, that's Washington. That's not just AOC. That's Washington. They're all in it. They're all delusional. They are all committed to wrecking this place. And it's going to be up to the sheriffs and people at the local level to make sure it doesn't happen. Washington, D.C. is filled with AOCs. She just happens to be one that's right out in the public with her stuff. But they're basically all the same.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's a great one.
Did you see that story?
No, I didn't, but it doesn't surprise me. AOC is always getting herself in shit like that because the woman is batshit crazy and has been saying shit like that forever. I mean, for as long as she's been in the public eye, which, like you just said, she's someone who I think maybe she says the most off the wall absurd things to stay in the public eye. I think there is a small group of that like radical left that's her support group. I mean, like the farthest radical left people, that's her fan club. Those are the ones that are like, yeah, that's our girl, and we want her to run for president. So I think that's who she kind of caters towards. But you're right in saying that she's one of many, 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 many of these same people. She just gets a lot of media attention for it. The rest of them are just doing the same thing and thinking the same thoughts behind closed doors and just not doing it out in the open. It's the same.
I think, and for whatever reason, she's become the champion of the extreme far left. And I think there's a divorce coming between the extreme far left and those that may be more moderate or an internal war of some sort. And I don't think it does anything but help those of us that are trying to get some of our freedom back as we see the Marxist group coming apart. But, one thing to keep in mind is they always kind of coalesce and come back together and support somebody who they think is going to give them the best chance to get back on the hands of levers of control.
Yeah, no doubt.
I'm
going to jump in.
Oh, yeah, good.
Yeah, because that immigration one, and you probably saw this one too, but for our listeners, a federal judge in Fresno has barred Border Patrol agents from arresting someone suspected of living in the U.S. illegally unless they have a warrant or a reason to believe the person might flee before a warrant can be obtained. So obviously this is a little bit specific to a certain region. This only applies to people within the court's Eastern District of California. But she's coming after Border Patrol agents, which are federal employees, and saying that you can't come after any illegal immigrants in this district unless you have an individualized warrant for each person, which, how is that even possible? These people are trying to stay off of any record. So how are you going to go and get a warrant for this person? One. And then two, we've already talked about the constitutionality of this. Like, this does fall within the federal jurisdiction of the government and what the federal government is supposed to do via the Constitution. So this is just another example. Obviously, we've seen a couple, I think it literally has only been 2 judges who have been arrested for harboring migrants in Wisconsin and New Mexico. Maybe there's more, if you know, I'm not sure. I think it's only been 2. This woman is probably just setting herself up on that path, if I had to speculate. But it seems like this fight is going on. These sanctuary cities are still trying to keep these people in country for whatever reason. And I don't know what that reason is. I mean, it's not helping your constituents. Like, it's just not. We know that. We see the way that it's affecting the economy and the landscape. It's just, it doesn't make sense. So I don't know what the logic is. But obviously it's still, I think, a faction of that radical, far extremist left. I don't think it's the moderates anymore, because this is one that is a pretty, like, bipartisan thought that we need to get rid of some of these people. I mean, it's not just that, like, economic impact, but there's a lot of really bad, really scary, really terrible stuff that's been happening in our country because of these people being here. And I'm sorry, but it's not a human right. Like, you do not have a right to just come into any country, take up space, and do whatever you want. We can send you back. And sorry, AOC, it's not kidnapping. You're not from here. If anything, we're helping you out. We're sending you home. It's the opposite of kidnapping, actually.
Yeah, this is such a great one. You're just, again, feeding me so much fuel for the discussion. First of all, to go back to a recent remark, this is part of the showdown coming between the executive branch and the judicial branch. Secondarily, we like to view things from a constitutional standpoint on this show. We stand for the Constitution. If we lived on the rule of law, a lot of these problems would be done and over with. So the executive branch, and that's what the Border Patrol is. They are part of the executive branch. They carry out the law. They don't make law. They don't judge laws. They carry out the law. There's already laws existing about illegals in this country. They are executing that law by going and arresting them, and the judge in this case does not have law-making authority, meaning there is a law on the books that says the illegals living in this country can be sent back, and they are executing the law, and the courts do not have the authority to write new law to overshoot what the executive branch already has the authority to do. People have to go back to the documents and live by the documents. But because the masses don't know what these things are or what the different branches are supposed to be doing, they just go along. Well, the judge is the boss. No, the judge is not the boss. The judicial branch should be the weakest of the 3, and the legislative branch, or the voice of the people, should be the strongest of the 3. That was the way it was intended. The judicial branch does not get to write laws that supersede existing law. That would have to be fought out, and they just don't get to legislate from the bench. There's existing law that gives those guys the authorities to carry out them deportations, and that's exactly what they should be doing, paying no heed to the judicial branch at all, because they don't get to make the laws.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know that with some of these, like, I just want to bring up the topic, but I am, like, letting my emotions get the best of me, and I want to have my opinion on it, which in this case, my opinion is that it's so maddening when I see people say that our democracy is being destroyed by this dictator Trump, and they cite examples like this. They cite these judges being arrested. The judges are the ones defying the Constitution, not Trump and his administration. And if you understood the Constitution, you would know that. Instead, you have the audacity to say that Trump and his team are the ones destroying and working outside of the bounds of the Constitution. It is so backwards and further proves the lack of intelligence surrounding the Constitution in any capacity in this country.
Even bigger than that, get a load of this. Biden deported 5 million people. Yeah. Trump has deported 100,000. They weren't screeching from the rooftops when the previous administration was deporting people, because it's something that has gone on for a long time, especially the bad actors and the people that have been a negative impact on the community. People, all administrations have, but now that it's Trump doing it, the media's got to jump on, and these sheep go along with it without even realizing that the guy that was asleep at the wheel, who they were cheering for, his administration had done the same thing at a much bigger scale. It is so pathetic how little people recognize what's going on around them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we say every week, like, we wish people would wake up. We wish people would pay attention. We wish people would get engaged. Because if you start paying attention and you still complain, like, good on you. I'm happy. I'm happy that you're engaged. Even if you disagree with me, at least you're paying attention. At least you're doing your own research. I might think it's like not the right research, but at least you're trying. But for people who just have no idea what's going on, to constantly be running their mouth, and this isn't a new problem. I'm sidebarring. I know. We should probably just get to the next point, because I'll keep being angry about this.
Well, again, an hour blew by, but I have one that I think you'll find especially interesting. And I think many of our listeners, going back to our Preparedness 101 discussions that we had with some really, really interesting and great, people that had so many good ideas on how to care for yourself outside the mainstream. This comes off of the Awakening Front, and it's why the system hates edible weeds and why you should love them. So the first one is dandelions, and I suspect that almost everybody around the country has an opportunity to have dandelions somewhere nearby them. And it's one of the things that are absolutely wonderful for you. You can use almost every bit of that plant. And this article goes on to say the real reason these plants are demonized, they give people independence. If you can step outside and harvest your own medicine and nutrition for free, you don't need to rely on corporations, supermarkets, or big pharma. That's why the system works so hard to keep this knowledge buried. This article is available on the Awakening Front. I would encourage anybody that is interested in preparing healthy food from your own backyard, finding medicinal purposes from food in your own backyard, to check out this article. It has many different plants. Many of them may not be native to your area, but the dandelion, number one on the list, is almost available to everybody in the Northern Hemisphere, and it has wonderful benefits. And this article, which I'm sure will never make it onto the mainstream media because it is going against the same people that are controlling the whole narrative, that being big pharma, big government, big food, military-industrial complex. They want us weak. They want us drugged. They want us uneducated. It is up to you. It is up to me to make yourself the opposite of that, to free yourself from the bonds that hold us. And one of the other things I wanted to mention while you was talking, we've said it many times, it's hard to free fools from the chains they revere. Voltaire. Yeah. Or, none are more hopelessly enslaved than those that falsely believe they are free. That's what's going on around us. People believe they're free because somebody told them they're free. You're not free. If you got to go ask somebody permission, you ain't free. So it is up to...
if you're being lied to on points like that, points like how to feed your family, points like how to get your family well when they're sick, if you're being lied to, if those tools are being systematically hidden from you, of course you're not free. Like a couple episodes ago, I brought up, drinking on a beach in Costa Rica. And I said, this is not the freedom I'm looking for. I was just throwing out an example, right? The freedom I'm looking for is a country where our own food is not the culprit to our diseases, and the medicine is not completely part of a system that is tied to our government and tied to how we got sick in the first place. Like, all of these things are the freedoms that I'm talking about. And yes, sure, they can exist if you apply a ton of effort and a ton of work, but they used to be something that were inherent to us as people on this earth. And over time, over years and years and years of people realizing that they could capitalize on these things that are free to you, clean water, clean air, medicine, food, things that exist in nature around you, they stole those things from us, and they're making you buy them back. Mm-hmm. That's not freedom, and that's the freedom we're talking about on here. And I'm not done. I know that you were kind of like trying to get us to the end there, but I do have a couple more I'd like to hit on.
Good. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Because I had a whole list. I had a lot longer list too, but I know if we stay on them, we'll be here till 10 o'clock at night,
Well, pick out a couple more of your favorites. I'm not quite ready to sign off just yet. So I've got a couple, yeah. All right. So speaking about the health thing, this is one that maybe people have seen because it's two big names, two big players, Trump and RFK Jr. They just shut down federal support for gain-of-function experiments. Why do I bring this one up? Because, again, similar to the chemtrail thing, similar to this underground network thing, gain-of-function research, you weren't even allowed to say that term on social media without getting shadow banned by Facebook and TikTok and Instagram and whatever, all of these social media players who were part of this agenda. You weren't even allowed to say that. Immediately blocked, conspiracy, shadow ban, misinformation. That was the big one, right? If you said gain-of-function research, you were spreading misinformation. It wasn't real. It didn't exist. Oh, that's so interesting because now we are no longer going to support with federal dollars, which, need I remind you, is not federal dollars, it is taxpayer dollars. We're no longer going to support gain-of-function experiments. That's weird because 3 years ago, gain-of-function experiments didn't exist.
Yep.
But they did exist. And it's not something that's new. It's something that's been going on for a very, very long time. 1947, U.S. military and intelligence agencies begin experimenting with biological weapons. 1969, CIA is bragging about achieving nuclear equivalency, the ability to wipe out the population for just 29 cents a person. 1969 again, President Nixon tours Fort Detrick, shuts it down. He calls it dual-use research, basically bioweapons disguised as vaccine development. Ends up getting over 180 countries to sign a treaty to end dual-use research because it is so dangerous, because, as it was termed by the CIA, it has nuclear equivalency. In 2001, a sneaky little clause in the Patriot Act gave government officials legal immunity, even if they violated the bioweapons treaty, basically relaunched the bioweapons arms race, is what RFK Kennedy Jr. said when they were having this discussion. 2014, Obama tried to stop this again, and it basically just didn't stop it. It just stopped U.S. labs and sent it all overseas, which is how you end up with a place like the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which is how, as we now know, COVID came into being. So we want to go back and talk about COVID. It's like somehow, some way, COVID comes up every single episode. Duh. This is like, it changed the course of human history, so yeah, we're going to keep talking about it, and it changed the course of freedom on a global scale. We're going to keep talking about it. This is something that was absolutely not true, did not exist, and now the leaders of our country are saying, okay, we're going to stop taking your money and applying it to these things, even though they've been trying to stop it, allegedly, for 50 years. Mm-hmm. So we'll see if anything comes of that. I don't think it'll last. If they get that to stop now, it doesn't mean it's not going to happen again. What's important to remember here is if they're saying that the funding stops, it means that thing exists and it will come back to bite us. We all have to start being aware of its presence. We all have to start waking up to the idea that we were lied to 5 freaking years ago. It's time to wake up to what happened there and recognize if it happened once, it can happen again. And until we recognize it as truth, it's not an if, it's a when.
Mm-hmm. And this to me illuminates the real root of the problem is political pressure is applied by large scale movements within the populace. And since the populace is more distracted, as we talked last week, by the bread and circuses, football games, and desperate housewives and all the nonsense, people are never going to pick up the story. I had a very similar one on my list that Tulsi Gabbard confirms an investigation into Dr. Anthony Fauci origins of COVID. So, so this is a person who's in a very lofty position, is making an open statement that yes, we are investigating the origins of COVID, and who is hearing it? We keep us all distracted with the other stuff over here. The mainstream media isn't going to present the story to the population that might provide some political energy behind it. So the thing is going to die in the vine. It does not matter what evidence she comes up with, unless they perp walk this guy across the stage. Nobody, and even if they did that, half the population or somewhere close to it is going to be saying that it's a right wing conspiracy, it's fascist, all the rest of it. Even though the NIH and the officials within the NIH and Dr. Anthony Fauci is being investigated by the Tulsi Gabbard administration. This is the stuff that only we can change, and we have to change by accepting the truth and deciding to do something about it. And we are so far removed from that. We will hear nothing but denials and that this is a right-wing conspiracy and all of those things, instead of accepting, as you pointed out, that if we're going to cut funding, then it did exist. And the other thing that it points out, most significantly, is our elected officials are not in charge. Exactly. This stuff started back in 1947, and every administration, or almost every administration, and that comes from both sides of the aisle, has tried to stop it, and it has not stopped. Our elected officials are not in charge of the program, and that's the key point that we got to wake up to. It isn't a Republican Democrat thing, people. The real people running the show has nothing to do with how many Republicans or how many Democrats are in the House and the Senate. Voting don't work. The soapbox is gone. The ballot box is gone. The jury box is gone. Yeah. That's the sad truth of the matter.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I've got another one kind of to that point, just to bring up the point you just made there about how it doesn't really matter who's in office. It's not the officials, the government officials that we vote in sometimes, even though they're all at fault, they're not necessarily the ones that are making a lot of these decisions. Because you may have seen that there is a lot of suspicion being raised that the IRS is targeting January 6th protesters this year. And that's how they're punishing them for now kind of being let off the hook by the Trump administration. And that goes back to show the fact that, like, there are bigger players pulling the strings. Like, okay, yeah, Trump and his team got these people off because they said they're innocent. They didn't do anything that would result in them going to prison. And yet somehow they're still being punished by people within our government.
Yep.
So it doesn't matter who's in office. It doesn't matter who has the presidency. It doesn't matter who looks like they're running the show. There are people behind the shadows. You can call them the deep state. You can call them the global cabal. You can call them whatever you want. I don't care. Just recognize they exist. Like, recognize they exist. It is so insane to me that this is going on. Oh, yay, the January 6th people are finally out of prison after being wrongfully held for 5 years. Great, but we're going to come after all your money, and you're all going to be audited. We're going to take everything that you have, which is probably not a lot if you spent the last 5 years in prison.
Yep.
It's just, and, you know, this isn't the first time the IRS has been accused of these types of things. Obviously, I'm sure you can attest to this. The Tea Party one, that was 2015 era. That was another year where there were a lot of people they were coming after just because they were in the Tea Party. And, you know, this deep state thing isn't new. I think, we hear the term more frequently now than ever before because more people are recognizing there is something going on here that isn't right. But it goes back 2015, it goes back 10 years beyond that, and 10 years more beyond that. Like, this isn't a new concept. This is something that has always been taking place underground, churning, and we're really just starting to see the grave impact that it has on this country now.
Yep. And as you point out, this has gone on for decades. It's gone on for more than a century, almost a century and a half. The government has been weaponized against those who speak out against it and against where all the wealth is truthfully going. And it has nothing to do with the U.S. Treasury or into the coffers for the U.S. government. It goes to the select few, robbing from the many and providing for the few. And the government agencies, these punks, and they're punks, that are doing the bidding of these elitists, coming after the people that they swore to protect. These are punks. I'm sorry. And the IRS and all the various other government agencies that are coming after the American population that does not go along with the agenda should be no more evidence, because we've all, both sides of the aisle, which is really no aisle, have had people that have been under assault by the weaponized government that is we are now living under. And it's a police state, mind you. We need to wake up. We have to wake up and get our heads out of our ass, or we are not only lost our republic, we have lost our freedom, and it's going to end up being much worse than that.
Yeah. All right. What's another one you got?
All right. This was just out of left field, a little bit less sinister. The U.S. student loan collections resume. Isn't that a novel idea? People took out a loan to go to school, and now we're in an uproar because they're going to be expected to pay it back. When you signed on that dotted line, folks, it was a loan, meaning you're going to pay it back. And because we had a nitwit in office who was doing desperately to provide for the masses from the public treasury to keep their side of the equation in office, now this has been rescinded and a loan repayment plan has been reinstituted, and there is protest in the street. You may not hear this, or if you do, it's going to be on the negative side. But anybody that thinks we should be able to get a waiver for a loan, that I would like the loan that I took out on my cars and on my house and all the rest of it repaid as well. This is the nonsense that people believe they are entitled to today, and they have absolutely no concept where these dollars come from. Until they get out of that liberal bastion Marxist ideology school academia and start working for themselves, will they recognize that we've all been ripped off by that select few. But I thought that was really funny, that we have to reinstitute a loan program, which, by the way, was stopped during the COVID years because, government told everybody to stay home, you couldn't work, so therefore you can't pay your loan. So guess what? Uncle Sam will do it for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Just absolute nonsense that we go along with. By the way, I heard today, the interest on the federal debt is over $1 trillion a year. And every penny that is spent on the interest, mind you, the interest is borrowed. So
perfect.
We're borrowing money to pay the interest while we pay off our student loans for everybody. This is how dim-witted we as a society have become, that we've cheered for the nonsense that, by the way, the Roman Empire and other ones have collapsed from within because of poor fiscal management, and we are on that path if we are not already collapsed completely.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, I mean, it just goes to show, like, these are the types of things that they really blast to people as being the most pressing issue, as if World War III has not been knocking on the door. Like, these are the things that they get people riled up about. And if people saw the bigger picture, they would understand that the problem isn't with the fact that they have to pay back their student loan. The problem is the fact that all of these schools are funded by the government, so they're paying for them double. You're already paying for them to exist. Look at what just happened with Harvard, like you said a couple weeks ago. Why are you even getting taxpayer dollars as funding in the first place? We're upset about, it's going to go away. Why are you being funded by us? And we're talking like not a little bit of money. And this is all of these freaking schools. And that system is a complete farce and you got tricked into going in the first place. Like, that's the bigger issue. We should be upset about that. Instead, we're just upset that we have to pay a loan back, which, like you said, if we were upset about every loan we'd have to pay back, like, what kind of world would we be living in? Oh, I know, a communist society, which is kind of what they want. So it does sort of all roll into itself there. But I've got one more.
Okay.
And this one, I think maybe people get like glimpses of, but I don't know if they necessarily know like how big the problem is. We've said the word lawfare a few times on this episode tonight. Certainly not the first time we've ever mentioned it. Within the last, we're kind of just barely over 100 days. I don't know how many days Trump's been in office, but we're a few months in, right? In that amount of time, there have been 220 lawsuits filed against the Trump administration. 220.
Right.
Like, that's insane. And what's crazy is that you can look up all of them. Like, there's sites dedicated to just, saying what all of these are and what their current status is and da-da-da. And a lot of them right now, of course, are about the dismantlement of many of these funding programs. It's like people are suing the president because he's deciding that we're not going to spend taxpayer dollars on these insane programs anymore. Who is suing for that type of thing? And if so, why are you in government?
Mm-hmm. So we know the people that are suing are the ones that are stealing.
Exactly.
That's
what I'm saying.
Yeah, and the other thing is, many of the lawsuits are related to sending immigrants back and all of those things. But guess what? Every administration, including the last one, people wake up and read the tea leaves. The last administration deported 5 million people, and now this guy who's in office has deported up to this point somewhere a little bit north of 100,000, and we have all kind of lawsuits against him because he somehow is oppressing the poor and the weak and the rest of the criminals that have snuck into this country, although everybody else has done it. It is so ludicrous. People are so far out of touch, but they get away with it because the mainstream media sells the story and the sheep go along with it. It's absolutely pathetic.
Yeah.
Now, a breaking story, and I think most of our listeners recognize that we do record on Tuesday nights and it ends up showing on Thursday nights. So I don't know where this is going to have escalated to by Thursday. But at the time of the recording, I think most of us that are paying attention to anything, as you suggested, World War III is knocking on the door. India has sent a large-scale missile barrage into Pakistan. Both are nuclear powers. Both have nuclear capability. This is a very dangerous situation, and I'm hoping by Thursday that it is calmed back down, although I expect it may not be. So we're offering up our prayers and thoughts that things wind down over there, because this is very precarious while they got us deciding that, trannies shouldn't be in the military and paying attention to all this other crap. While the world is burning around us, we have hotspots in Ukraine now, in Pakistan and India and the Middle East, and of course out around Taiwan. Things have been going on there and ratcheting up for quite a while. So hopefully none of this boils over and drags us into a boots on the ground situation. But I think that's where those in charge of the whole program are pushing us.
I completely agree. And, going back to some of the more lighthearted points that you brought up earlier, the dandelion thing. We had a great series about self-sufficiency, and these are the times that you want to be thinking about those things. Like, go back through those videos and start looking at ways that you can better prepare your family, because this does keep escalating. It's in different countries. There's something new that keeps popping up, but like eventually it's going to come to us. And I don't know how much longer we have before that happens. So I would say that getting you and your family prepared is not an unreasonable thing to be thinking about.
Not at all. And I would like to mention that my wife tonight made dandelion jelly, at first attempt at that. And that's setting up right now. Yep. So they're out there, early in the season. They're really abundant, and they are many, many medicinal purposes and other recipes that you can use the dandelion for. So as we always do, we try to offer solutions as well. So become more independent, learn what you can use out in your neighborhood, out in your little woods around your home if you have any, because there's all kind of things that are out there that, of course, are going to be poo-pooed by big pharma and the big food. But there are many of our ancestors have found these things to be useful, and we would encourage everybody to follow up and to make use of these things that are out there for us.
Yeah, and I mean, we could go down a long rabbit hole of that. I could talk about dandelions for a whole episode, to be honest, but I won't do it. I'll just throw another solution out there. Dive into one of these topics, like really deep, really dive into it. Pick one of these things we discussed tonight and really kind of go down a rabbit hole, because it's amazing what you uncover when you do take the time to do it and when you start getting off that first page of Google. And I think, like I said, a lot of our listeners, they do see similar news to what we see. So maybe some of these stories aren't new to anyone listening to this episode tonight. But I would really encourage you to look into them deeper so that you have a good knowledge base so that you can share them with someone. Because earlier in the episode, we said how important it is to find one thing that resonates with somebody, because that wakes them up entirely. I mean, when you hear people's testimonies about what woke them up and brought them to like the right side, and I don't just mean right wing, I mean like the right side of truth and what's really happening and seeing what's going on in the world, it was oftentimes just one thing. It could be their health, it could be their food, there's a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. But one topic is often what wakes people up. So I would recommend to like really educate yourself on something that is important to you that you heard and how you can translate that message to other people, because it might be what changes their entire life. It might wake them up to an entire new way of being. It might wake them up to an entirely new way to raise their family, to think about the world around them. So I think it's really important that we do not just seek out these stories, but we understand them, because I've had a lot of stories where it's very hard to find what someone might call a reputable source for them. And I can talk about it all day, and I can cite these random off-the-wall websites. But if it's not something that someone's heard about, if it's not on CNN or Fox News or MSNBC or the New York Times, they write it off. But if you come with enough substance behind your story, they can't write it off anymore. So find what is important to you, look into it further. I mean, understand that discernment is a skill, and, go into the world trying to help other people find that skill.
That was great, and I want to just follow up by suggesting that if you're a young couple, young parents, and you have children, try to teach them to be broad in their approach in everything. Don't just stay tunnel visioned on the one source for anything. Find a broad source, and in addition to what we talked about last week, take a walk in the woods. Leave the phone behind. Go out to the local park, go out to the local stream, take a walk in the woods, clear your head, get away from all the garbage that's being pounded into you on every front and every medium, and allow yourself to absorb the beauty that's out there and look at the wonderful things that we have at our disposal that can help us get through life. Give your kids a broad approach to looking at what's going on. Don't just stay tunnel vision on your favorite news outlet, as it's called, or propaganda outlet, as I would suggest, but seek a broad approach of opinion and story on these things so that you can then parse out these differences and come to the truth.
Yeah, that's perfect. Well, it's been a great episode. I know we bounced around a lot. We went from one topic to the next and just kind of went all over the map there, but a great example of how much is going on in the world when you start looking into it. So I'm all set, I think, on my end. I got out a lot of good rants. So, Pops, if you're finished, you can close us out.
I am, and I'm just going to, before I read the verse, I'm going to say that I offer up my prayers and hopes that the event that has taken place in India and Pakistan winds down quickly and doesn't escalate. The Bible verse tonight: these are the things you are to do. Speak the truth to each other, and render true and sound judgment in your courts. And that came from Zechariah 8, verse 16.
Amen. What a powerful one.
Yeah, for sure. Great show. As always, look forward to seeing you next week. And if anything big happens in the meantime, we can certainly get together on it.
Yeah, that sounds good. All right, everybody. You guys know the drill. You know where to find us. Always check out thefourthbox.com. Submit any questions or any ideas for things you might want to hear. But until next week, stay vigilant.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you so much for listening. We really do appreciate the support and truly love getting to share this message with anyone who wants or needs it. The best way for you to support the show is to subscribe, add a rating, and share with everyone you know. You can find us on Instagram, X, and at thefourthbox.com. We'll see you next Thursday at 6 p.m. Stay vigilant.